Preface: The Hindustan Unilever Story. Few Indians have heard of Hindustan Unilever Limited (HUL), but they are intimate with the brands it sells. To name a few: Lifebuoy, Dove, Clinic Plus, Pond's, Lakme, Close Up, Surf Excel, Vim, Brook Bond, Brew, Quality Walls, Kisan, and as of 2020, Horlicks. 9 out of 10 Indian households use an HUL product every month. Forget Google and Facebook, more Indians use HUL products than those who own a television, those who vote, or even those who have running water electricity. Even if you don't know how much about Hindustan Unilever, you have grown up with it and you are touching it every single day of your life, just like your parents, grandparents, and their grandparents. While researching for this book, I came across a faded copy of the first annual report of the newly incorporated Hindustan Unilever in 1958. The company was already among the largest in the country and made a profit after tax of rupees 1 crore. In 2019, the company made a profit of rupees 6,080 crore, a compound annual growth of 15%. In the same period that HUL grew its profit 6,000 times, the Indian economy grew 1,400 times. It is hard to find another large company that has delivered 15% earnings growth over 60 years anywhere in the world. It is nearly impossible to find one that has stayed in the top 5 of a large country for over 60 years. It is not just the long term performance of HUL that is stellar. Its current return on capital employed ROCE of 92% is by far the highest in the country. In just the last decade, it has given shareholders an annual return of 23%, with its stock price up 7 times. This has made HUL an iconic company on Dalal Street. If analysts were to rate Indian companies over a century on financial and non financial impact, HUL would feature on the top 3 of all and number 1 of most lists. HUL's market cap has now crossed $60 billion, making it one of the most valuable fast moving consumer goods companies in the world, ahead of the global valuations of Colgate Palmolive, Kraft Heinz, Mondelez, and Reckitt Benckiser. Apart from being omnipresent in our lives and being at the top of the business game for a very long time, HUL is an enormously influential company. For the last decade, HUL has been ranked by AC Nielsen as the dream employer of choice in the top 20 business schools in India. HUL is taken extremely seriously in government circles, with many of its past chairmen being Padma Bhushan and Padma Vibhushan awardees. Most famously, nobody gives more CEOs to corporate India than HUL. From Nestle to Diageo to Airtel to Hindalco to DMart to Raymond to the Star Network, there are currently around 400 HUL alumni who are CEOs, CXOs across corporate India. In corporate circles, HUL is well known by the nickname the CEO Factory. Because of the influence of its alumni, many business practices in corporate India have their origin in HUL. This is obviously the case in sales, marketing, and HR, but it also exists in finance, supply chain, R&D, and legal. There is a good chance that not only are you using HUL products, you are already working in a way that HUL does. This book asks and then answers the question of why a company this large has been successful for so long. What exactly do managers learn in HUL that makes them so much in demand as CEOs across industry? A lot of people assume that there must be a codified HUL way of doing things that its manager are able to apply elsewhere. Well, there isn't. Plenty of internal rule books exist, but the real HUL way resides not in manuals but in practices and beliefs. There is an HUL way of advertising, of sales, and of running a manufacturing operation. These are well defined processes. There is also an HUL way of operating a business with rigor, consumer connectedness, discipline, and above all, integrity. I joined HUL in 1999 as a management trainee. During my 20 years in the company, I have worked across the three divisions in HUL: personal care, home care, and foods and refreshments in a variety of roles, and I'm currently also an executive director in its management committee, getting a bird's eye view of the entire organization. I draw from these 20 years of experience to try to synthesize how I think HUL works, warts and all. But it is like the story of the blind man describing an elephant. Despite the time I have spent here, I can only infer from my own subjective experience. I hope many HUL employees and alumni who have seen other sides of this elephant will be motivated to write down their own views. It is also a perilous job writing a book like this while still serving the company as an executive director. What should one keep confidential? How honest can one be about the failings of the company? How extensive should I be in giving credit to the people who have contributed to the company wins? My former boss, Sanjay Dubey, reminded me that my primary responsibility in writing this book is to the reader, and with the exception of genuinely confidential information, this is the principle I have tried to follow. Needless to say, the views expressed in this book are entirely my own and not of HUL. The first chapter deals with the characteristics that have made HUL a CEO factory. Chapters 2 to 8 look at different functions within HUL and how they work, from marketing and advertising to sales and cost management and HR. Chapter 9 concludes with the values that have been drilled into generations of HUL managers. I hope this book is useful to corporate executives trying to understand how HUL thinks about a function like advertising or cost management, to entrepreneurs trying to build a culture in their organization, to MBA students trying to get a broader brush view of the corporate world, but most importantly, to anyone in India trying to build an institution that lasts. Let me start with a few lines on the history of HUL and how it came into being. If you believe, as Henry Ford did, that history is bunk, you can skip it and go to the first chapter directly. Behind HUL: English marketing, Dutch acumen, and Indian entrepreneurship. Hindustan Unilever is a child of two parents, the British Lever brothers and the Dutch Margarine Union, merged to create Unilever in 1930. But Hindustan Unilever has the unique mix of this European Unilever with a special Indian twist to its DNA. Having adapted to Indian conditions for the last 6 decades, let us begin with the birth. William Lever, the founder of Lever Brothers, was an enlightened, if eccentric, capitalist. Joining his father's grocery business, he soon spotted the opportunity for pre-packed goods. He created a washing soap that was different from other soaps in the market as it contained none of the fillers or chemicals that added to the size of the soap but did nothing for its performance. He set up a company, naming it Lever Brothers, and the product Sunlight. Sunlight was smaller but contained more punch than other soaps, and in a few years, by 1888, it had become one of the biggest brands in the United Kingdom. Lever Brothers soon began to face competition from an unlikely source: margarine, a butter substitute made from vegetable fat, was discovered in 1869 during the Franco-Prussian War when butter was in short supply. The invention of hydrogenation, which is increasing the melting point of oils through the addition of hydrogen, allowed the making of margarine from cheaper vegetable oils. This brought the Dutch margarine makers Margarine Union in direct competition with Lever Brothers, who used vegetable oils in soap for the sourcing of vegetable oils. Both considered the merger. Apart from competition for raw materials, there was another strategic reason for the merger. Margarine Union was on a financially stronger footing but was essentially a continental European company. Lever Brothers, on the other hand, had a wide global footprint but had lately been in financial difficulties because of overexpansion by its colorful founder. This mutually beneficial merger between the Dutch margarine Union and the English Lever brothers resulted in the creation of Unilever in 1930. Two of William Lever's exceptional qualities continue to be part of HUL's genetic pool: brilliant marketing and social responsibility. A salesperson in his early days, William Lever had an instinct for marketing. Lever was by no means the pioneer in advertising. That credit probably goes to Pear's Soaps, incidentally now owned by HUL, Thomas Barrett. His somewhat meaningless catchphrase, "Good morning, have you used Pear's soap?" became so popular that in the early 20th century, no top hat doffing was complete without the greeting, says Adam McQueen in his must read, The King of Sunlight, a definitive biography of William Lever. Lever, however, transformed advertising from mere name recognition to product benefits being conveyed in an insightful manner. An early ad of Sunlight, for instance, shows a woman doing back-breaking laundry and its caption reads, "Wonder why a woman looks older sooner than a man?" A famous Persil detergent ad from a later period chuckles to the photo of two girls in differently white uniforms. Someone's mum isn't using Persil. But if William Lever is remembered today, it is mainly in his role of the enlightened capitalist. In 1888, near the soap factory at Warrington, he built a town called Port Sunlight for his employees. At a time when 90% of British citizens did not own their own homes, Lever employees were given free housing, medical care, schools, recreational facilities, and, most radically, pensions. Port Sunlight is now recognized as the earliest example of a factory city, the most famous Indian example of which is the Tata's Jamshedpur. When it was founded in 1930, Unilever already had its genetic code in place, a Protestant work ethic and commercial acumen from its Dutch owners, and brilliant marketing with a social conscience from its English founder, William Lever. In the 1950s, Unilever chairman Geoffrey Hayward introduced a third genetic stand, one that differentiates Unilever even today from other multinationals. Hayward felt that as Unilever expanded globally, it needed delegation to the end of the limbs. Overseas units were to be run not by expatriates in London but by locals who were much closer to the market. It was a formal HR policy called "ization," and the organization to benefit the most was the recently formed Hindustan Lever Limited. Birth and growth of HUL. William Lever introduced Indians to the joy of sunlight and lifebuoy as early as 1888 to meet, as he characteristically put it, the washing needs of the teeming millions of India. The precursor companies to HUL, Hindustan Vanaspati Manufacturing and Lever Brothers, were incorporated in the early 1930s. Both were owned by Unilever, though Hindustan Lever Limited, as HUL was formerly known, was formed by their merger only in 1956. So, in a sense, the real history of HUL in India is over 125 years old. The history of HUL can broadly be broken up into three phases: a phase of market development, followed by managing in a highly regulated environment, and then competing in an open economy. Each of the three phases had added to the genetic makeup of HUL, from the importance of category development to being resilient and innovative in times of extraordinary difficulty to becoming an even more consumer focused company. If the genes that HUL inherited at birth were Dutch thrift and British marketing savviness and social consciousness, ever changing Indian conditions have made HUL resilient and innovative. The first phase lasted till the 1960s, where mainly British but also a few Indian managers introduced India to the core categories of vanaspati, soap, tea, and powder detergent. A few decades before this, Lipton and Brook Bond, both part of HUL today, responded to Viceroy Lord Curzon's clarion call to develop the domestic tea market in order to find an outlet for the excess tea production that was taking place in Assam. Tea, a quite essentially British drink, was treated with suspicion in India. It was considered an addiction and something that weakened you. This led to the creation of Indian chai, high in milk and sugar content, that was sold to the customer as a nutritious drink. As the undated ad shows, the invention of a chai is just one example of HUL's core management principle, developing new categories. Nihal Kaviratne, a former chairperson of Unilever Indonesia, told me how HUL developed the market for detergent bars. In 1957, HUL launched Surf NSD, non-soapy detergent powder made from petrochemicals. Until then, Indians had washed their clothes with HUL Sunlight Laundry Bar, which was made from vegetable oil. Surf powder was more effective but required a habit change, that of soaking clothes. Remember, this was well before washing machines had arrived, and Indians were reluctant to clean clothes by soaking dirty things. To bathe, Indians scrubbed and poured water onto themselves and would not dream of stepping into a tub. HUL initiated a gigantic effort to knock on doors and demonstrate to skeptical housewives that solution washing with the NST product would lead to far superior results. These women were used to direct application but saw that the surf powder required much less work, no scrubbing. That was a dramatic improvement for them, since even a good quality soap bar like Sunlight took time to lather in the hard water coming out of their taps. In addition, HUL included plastic buckets as promotional gifts with their new surf product. Plastic bucket manufacturers made a killing. Surf did make headway, but the majority of Indians, while acknowledging the benefit of an NLSD powder, continued to use the direct application soap bar. B.A. Vatsal had joined HUL as a management trainee in 1964. When he returned to India, cutting short his studies on scholarship at Stanford to take care of his parents, an outstanding product of Elphinstone College, Vatsal was regarded as one of the finest minds in HUL history and seen as someone with a very bright future. It was he who conceived the idea of providing the housewife with the benefits of NSD in a direct application product. The technical process was convoluted and had not been attempted anywhere else. The English marketing director, David Webb, was convinced that it was a great step backwards after the many years of hard work to get housewives to switch over to solution washing. Watzel persisted and pestered Webb until Webb finally agreed to allow him to market test Ren NSD bar to prove that it would fail. And so it was that in the late 1960s, a market test was actioned in Bangalore. It proved an outstanding success and the product was launched nationally in 1971. Watzel passed away prematurely in 1974, but his creation Rinba is one of the most famous brands in India today. The second phase of HUL is from the late 1960s to the early 1980s, when HUL had to reckon with the system of socialist government controls known as the license permit quota Raj. While most multinationals either left India or diluted their stake below 50%, HUL persisted. It is not clear exactly why, but it probably had to do with the proactive Indianization of management that Unilever had encouraged in the previous decade. There were two major challenges HUL faced in this period: price control and Unilever retaining majority control. Both Vanaspati and soaps were subject to price control in the 1960s and 1970s, and in the early 1970s, HUL started making cash losses in India. What followed was the adoption of a very Indian entrepreneurial mentality of flexibility come resourcefulness that persists in the HUL DNA even today. HUL realized that the imported oil it was using for soap making was a drain on India's foreign exchange reserves. which the government of the day considered a precious commodity. So, HUL scientists devised soap that substituted locally grown castor oil and rice bran oil for imported oil. HUL chairman T. Thomas then went to meet the chemicals minister D.K. Barua to request removal of price control in exchange for HUL saving precious foreign currency. The Congress patrician told him that nobody used soap, and as evidence claimed that he himself got massaged with olive oil and a hot towel every day. Nonetheless, the government agreed to decontrol soap prices. Retaining 50% equity share of Unilever was as tricky. In late 1973, the government introduced the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act (FERA), where foreign equity holding would have to be reduced to less than 41% unless the sector was considered capital intensive. Since consumer goods were not considered capital intensive, the ownership of Unilever would fall from 85% to 41%. T. Thomas decided to oppose this policy. In his autobiography, T.T., as T. Thomas was better known, reflected on why he felt it was important for Unilever to continue retaining 51% share. The first and the foremost reason was that I firmly believed in the Unilever system of developing and promoting professional managers without any involvement of the common Indian failings of linguistic, regional, or religious considerations. TT did several things to hold on to 51% shareholding. He first offered to export 10% of HUL's turnover to earn the country precious foreign exchange. To meet this undertaking, HUL got into several categories such as chemicals, carpets, leather, and fisheries and used its global clout to ensure that the 10% target was met. Second, TT kept negotiating with the government for smaller Unilever equity reductions. 85% came down to 65% and then to 51% over several years. He was convinced that government policy would eventually change and it was better to bet through the difficult overs than to give in. If HUL adapted to government control in the heyday of the license quota permit Raj, the early 1990s saw HUL adapting to liberalization. Excise duties fell, consumer income started rising, and till the late 1990s, HUL racked in a bonanza. However, in the new millennium, it realized that its tools for competing in a closed economy were blunt in an increasingly competitive India. Local competitors like Nirma were closer to the consumer, and big multinationals were willing to forego short term profits to get a toehold in that country. The period between 2001 and 2009 was a very tough decade for HUL, where share prices remained stagnant. In the hindsight, it was a period where the company strengthened several brands and also unblinkingly defended its laundry business from a major competitor attack. In 2009, HUL had a particularly difficult period on the back of extremely volatile commodity prices. In early 2008, commodity prices, led by oil at $120 a barrel, shot up and then crashed in the late 2008 to $40. On the way up, unlike local competitors who just cut media investment, HUL rapidly priced up, and on the way down, didn't drop prices fast enough. Both decisions cost HUL dearly in terms of market shares. The crisis seems to have got the best back into HUL, and since 2010, the company's share price has increased eightfold. So, yes, there is an HUL way of management that insiders and informed outsiders recognize or at least intuitively sense. Being strongly Indian and simultaneously strongly Western is at the heart of the HUL way of management. The ability to work the dusky markets while being comfortable in Europe. The inherent belief, like William Liver had, in being good before being great. The Western belief in mediocrity, Dutch economy, Indian entrepreneurship. These pulls from all sides have ensured that HUL has remained successful through the decades.